Hi, Angela. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Very, very happy to be here behind the curtain. And yeah, I'm really glad we could chat today. It's great.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you. I've read your brilliant book about your diaries from your days as a punk, a teenage punk, in and around like the scene in this. Like you were right at the center of it all, weren't you?
Yeah. Um, well, it was really like 76, 77. I grew up in New York in the East Village, and I was really not planning to get into punk, but it happened to be, uh, blossoming right there in the neighborhood. And I became really curious, and that's kind of where it started.
What was life like for you before punk came along?
Well, I was in high school, schoolgirl. Um, it's funny because I played in a band at the time, and the band was a cover band. And so we played, all kinds of stuff, everything from like the Jefferson Airplane, which was rather a favorite of mine, I should say. But we played a lot of different music, but it was covers, and we played at all the high school dances. And it was fun. We used to, one of the, my cousin actually went out with a woman who he had met at the United Nations High School. And she was the daughter of or the niece of a kind of bigwig producer for United Artists Pictures. And so we used to rehearse in this amazing screening room with, it was red velvet seats up on Madison Avenue. And it was just a real laugh because we were, 15, 16 and going in there and playing our tunes. Um, but I was playing music, singing, and yeah, I really enjoyed that, and that kept me going. So I was living at home, had my band, was yeah, not doing so great in school. Yeah, I was good in the art department, but when it came to like mathematics and I was really like I was not very good at all that. So
Well, you kept your creativity all the way through the punk scene. Like you're in and out of bands. Obviously, you've got the diary and stuff, so you were still creative at that point.
yeah, absolutely. And so the diaries, like all the drawings, especially, were kind of an extension of something I'd already been doing for years, like really since I was a young kid. And I was always drawing pictures of people, and I was kind of fascinated even by the 60s, as a 70s teenager. So I'd be drawing pictures of, psychedelic kind of characters. And then suddenly 3 months later, they became a little different. And I see like a picture of Sue Catwoman in the an imported magazine. And I was like, oh my, that's like, I've never seen anything like that before. It's pretty incredible how new it all was at the time.
Yeah, that's the thing with the book as well. Obviously, it's your diaries and it's about the punk scene musically, culturally, but it takes like somebody who wasn't around at that time, kind of history in a way, isn't it? Like it's culturally, it shows you what was happening at the time with punk
Yeah,
and outside of punk.
absolutely. And I think, part of it's like you are that young person who the world is opening up in front of your eyes. And so you're kind of looking for some real spark. And I think that was it for me. I decided also that I could feel independent. And, I think that's really important in your sort of adolescent and teens, is that thing that you discover that's not necessarily what your siblings are into. It's like it's your thing. Um, of course, as time goes on, I realize it wasn't just my thing. there, were, there were plenty of people out there. Um, oh, and then by the time I went to England in 78, I was like, wow. Oh, like in New York, in terms of like really flashy looking punks, um, Yeah, there really wasn't that sort of style like you had in England with the spiky hair so much. I mean, a little bit with Richard Hell and but it was more kind of rock and roll, you know. But coming to England, that was like it was so ready, like, you know, King's Road Saturday afternoon was packed with punks.
We'll get onto all of that, like your trip to England and stuff. But with the book, people say like you shouldn't share your diaries. But what was it that made you want to share your this diary?
Um, I think that, you know, it was sort of really about 20 years ago, I started to talk to friends about the diaries. And I knew it wasn't just what I wrote, but I knew there were pictures. And, you know, there was ephemera, there was like ticket stubs and all just a lot of stuff that I had saved at that point. And which is still something I think maybe I can do like another project with. But I thought I knew it was kind of special. And then the diaries too, you know, it's when you're writing something like that, you're just writing what's happening. And but as it turns out, like the cast of characters were kind of pretty unusual and fascinating. So I just thought, you know, the diary format is something I'm comfortable with. And now the subject matter becomes really interesting. But I, you know, I've kept some journals through the years since then, but I don't think I plan to publish them.
Do you know, like when you were writing this down in the diary and stuff, everything that was happening around you, did you feel like you were living in an important time in history?
I did. I think I did. I was just sort of sucking up the energy. I really didn't, it was going so fast, you know, the sheer energy. And I think that comes across in the diaries of that everything's just unfolding. It becomes this nightly absorption of activity and music that that's part of why I wanted to write it down, you know, because I better remember this because actually this is pretty cool stuff, you know.
There's a bit at the end of 79 where there's like you're at a gig, like well, two gigs sometimes a day. It shows like the how like you say how fast paced it was.
Yeah. It's you know, growing up in the East Village, you had CBGBs and then Max's Kansas City, which back then seemed like really kind of far away from each other, but we would bounce back and forth. And um, so Max's was on 17th Street, Park Avenue, and CBGB's was down on 3rd Street in the Bowery. So, you know, really like you could walk that in 15 minutes, but we jumped back and forth. We were constantly on the move because there was like, oh, you know, okay, Johnny Thunder's Heartbreakers at Max's tonight, but you know, the Cramps are playing. So we got to be at the Cramps. And uh-oh, Johnny Rotten's in town. Like, hey, you know, can you imagine before cell phones, right? Somehow somebody shows up, they're like, oh yeah, I saw Johnny Rotten's in town. He's at Max's. And you'd be like, he's there? Okay, better shoot up to, you know, try to catch these characters while they were in town. I definitely remember that. Um, yeah, when Johnny Rotten showed up in New York City, it was a big deal. And I'm trying to think if he did show up. I think he was there before the Pistols broke up, but certainly after that initial period, he kind of came back and yeah, was a little bit in shock, I think.
Well, he was at your wedding years later, wasn't he?
Oh my goodness, he did show up to my wedding, and it's funny because I think Ari Up from the Slits invited him because you know I really don't remember inviting him. I didn't know him. You know, to this day, I don't really know him, and he showed up, and it was so cool. And it was this disco, and he came in, and he, you know, I think he was with Nora, his wife, and so Nora was the mom of Ari, and like, oh, you know, they're probably like, yeah, Angela's friend Witchetty's Disco, that pig bag. And so they would have been aware of who we are. And he showed up, and I remember at the time it was like renting the disco, High Street, Kensington. It was kind of, it was expensive. And so we couldn't do the free bar, maybe there was a champagne toast, and I think he was kind of, well, okay, I'll have a quick one and then I'm off. But it was a thrill. Yeah, he showed up.
What was your introduction to punk then?
I think my introduction was kind of a little handful of things. It wasn't like just one thing that happened. It was a combination of just seeing people in the neighborhood and realizing something's going on. Characters like maybe Patti Smith or television, walking in the neighborhood. There was also the moment my brother brings little Johnny Jewel home, and we listened to that wonderful single on Orc Records, and just, what is this? This is totally different. But I had seen Patti Smith in 1975, I believe, at the Palladium, and I saw my first shows I remember were like Blondie at CBGB's, maybe early 76. And then it kind of just, skyrocketed from there.
Do you think you had like the punk sort of ethic before punk came along?
You mean like kind of
Like wanting to be different and stand out and
I think so. I think I did. And when I think about it now, it's been interesting to reflect on the book, and it's a different thing than when you first write it, publish it. Now you've kind of digested different conversations or feelings. And I do see that it was also my way of being like a girl, a woman in the scene. And where do I fit in, because I was sort of a tomboy in back in grade school. And I've always felt a little kind of a little suspicious of sort of being overtly kind of feminine in a way. But that's, girls were doing that, and girls were, blow drying their hair and all of this stuff, which I was not doing when I was 17. I was cutting it myself. And so, yeah, I think, I was looking for an alternative style for sure.
did you learn new things about yourself then when you were writing the book and like going back through your diaries? Did you learn things about your younger self?
Yeah, I did. And I feel like I still am. I still am. And part of it is definitely to do with, this sort of striving to be original and to find my own voice. Very much like trying to see the world in a creative way and be aware of what was going on at the time. But, I was also kind of, really needed something to latch onto. My parents had got divorced, and there were changes that made me a little more open and willing to, just find this expression and delve into it. Having said that, I was a little shy, and, it's sometimes with the diaries, people think like, oh, how did you do all of that? Like, you must have been really, aggressive or out there. But I was kind of cautious, as much as I sort of threw myself in, I was a little bit careful to, I think, which is kind of lucky in retrospect.
Were you always? Oh, sorry.
No, so I think I did learn that about myself, that I was also kind of taking care of myself a little bit too.
I was going to say, were you always determined to get into that inner circle, or did it just happen by being there at like the right place at the right time?
Definitely right place, right time. But I think, it all happened so fast. That's the thing. It's like, wow. I, when I first became aware of punk, it was sort of gradual. Like, what's sort of interesting is, um, I just happen to have a book here on my shelf. But this was my high school yearbook.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Called Expression. And we all had poetry and different things in here. And this is my high school picture, my yearbook page. And I'm 17. So this would have been taken in like maybe fall 76, late fall or winter. And, I'm still wearing like a sort of this jacket that's very 60s in a way. And it's a little definition here. It says sing because I was singing. But the difference between this and then going into, something like that is, is that's about almost 2 years. And
Yeah.
but initially, yeah, I was like, as soon as I discovered, I thought, oh, got to get rid of these flares, got to get rid of the bell bottom. Like that's the first thing that's got to go, the bell bottoms, which of course is what we called them over here. And but you couldn't find a pair of like black jeans. I mean, somewhere they existed because I saw people wearing them. But, I had to take these sort of baggy painter's pants and ask my grandmother, can you, sew them in skin tight? She said, skin tight? Why do you want them skin tight? And I was like, well, no, that's what it's got to be. And so there was that. And then, the cutting the hair a little bit jagged, the bangs. Suddenly I started to wear makeup. I was not wearing makeup really in my life up till then. So even those things, as insignificant in a way as they might seem today, like back then were a big deal. Later, I peroxided, and I was really kind of influenced by the British aesthetic, and certainly the Slits, who had to have been the coolest looking band for me out there. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the Slits, actually, they stayed at your house, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Ari stayed at our house, and there was another Penny who played keyboards on tour. It's just Ari and Penny. I think Tessa and Viv, they stayed somewhere else. But Ari was quite a handful, and she stayed for quite a long time. I think about maybe a week. And I have to say, thank you, Mom, because my mom, she was very tolerant, and she was with us, always encouraged us, our different scenes, music and things, very supportive. But sometimes, she loved Ari. She was so fascinated by her, this woman with these dreadlocks and this German accent, she was very exotic. But, Ari was also a big personality. So, it was interesting because though Ari had a big energetic personality, she was also looking to be kind of have quiet time. And I remember she liked staying because it was like a real home, and I think she was craving that because she, of course, got into this whole punk scene at a really young age. I mean, she was 14. So, yeah. So I think that for her, like staying at my mom's, it felt comfortable. It's like, oh, there's an adult around, and actually that's a good thing.
Well, like we say, you got into the inner circle. You made lots of great friends through punk. When you got into it and were mixing with the bands and things, who were some of your favourite people and favourite interactions?
I think, I mean, for me, some of the people in the audience, some of whom were in bands, were um, certainly as important and fun as people who were on the stage. But that was the great thing, is like hanging out at CBGB's in my mind. I can see standing there right next to Lux Interior, the Cramps, or um, some of the Blessed. They were another band that I knew who were really young. And we were always up to pranks and writing graffiti in the bathroom. But everybody, then you'd see James Chance in the audience, Lydia Lunch, um, of course, who I befriended because she was also like a young girl. And but it was, the stage and the audience was really interchangeable, which was fun
Yeah.
because, you know, you became a little less in awe, even though I was not singing on the stage at that point. Um, but it was, you felt a little kind of like, oh, well, I see they're out every night just like I am.
What's crazy is there's characters in that like punk scene. For example, Sid Vicious and Nancy that are sort of like mythologized now, like especially for somebody like me that wasn't around at the time. Like they seem like they don't seem like real life people, but you even bumped into them too, didn't you?
I did when he played at Max's Kansas City, and he put together this band with, I think, Mick Jones was in it, and a couple of other, one of the bands, the Idols, Steve Dior, a few other, I forget who else was in the band, but oh, of course, I wouldn't miss that for the world. But having said that, we already knew that Sid was in pretty poor shape. Um, and so it was a mystery. How would he get through the show? And of course, I mean, Johnny Thunders was a bit of the same
Yeah.
um, deal because they were both, junkies, and sometimes really you didn't know like how they would make it through the show. Their eyes would be like falling, and but they did somehow, amazingly. But that was a sold out show, and it was a big hype. And that was I went there and I somehow got in. I There were all these people crushing at the door. I mean, Max's wasn't that big a place. And it was upstairs, and I think it was 2 nights he played, and we were packed in because there wasn't really I don't think there was a guest list, and we wouldn't have been able to get on that guest list anyway. So I just packed in, and I just kind of was like, "Hey, Sid, um, you know, love to see the show." And he was like, "Oh, she's all right." That's it was like that. And then Nancy came up to me, and she was like, "Here, let me buy you a drink." and I'd already heard about her. So I was like, "Oh my God, it's Nancy Spungen. Ay, ay, ay." And she had a bit of a reputation. She was a bit of a little bit rough around the edges. So she buys me a drink, and she's like, "Oh, there's so many girls fawning all over Sid and dee dee dee." And I'm like, it's like, "Yeah, well, that's true. He's a popular guy." And then off she went. But it was a funny interaction. Yeah.
With somebody like Nancy, obviously she was a groupie before she met Sid. Like as a woman in the scene, would you be seen as that as a perspective as a fan of punk?
Well, you were aware of the groupies on the scene for sure. And I think that Nancy Spungen was certainly, had before Sid a certain history. And there were girls, and the British bands would show up, and there was a kind of a hovering. And I always saw myself as a fan. That was my thing. It was like about the music. And it would kind of, to be honest, it sort of got on my nerves that these other people, some of the like groupie girls, or, it could be other, um, different people who were like in the music industry, um, that they would have access, just somehow the way they slipped in, through like, oh, let's take you on the photo shoot, or, you know, um, just lured in by kind of attractive women on the scene. And I remember feeling like, that's kind of not fair. Like, what about the fans? What about the kids? So sometimes there was a little bit of a conflict for me because, I was still a flirtatious girl, um, but I was kind of, I didn't want to be seen in that light.
Yeah, a lot of great things came out of punk, but obviously there was like a dark side to it. Like you mentioned, the drugs, there was the violence as well. Did you see a lot of
Yeah.
the dark side to it as well?
The what?
Did you see a lot of that dark side in the punk scene?
Yeah, I did. I did. I think a little bit more in New York initially. And it was kind of scary because, it was the 70s. And it was a part of me that, like, we all like to have a drink and stuff, but, or smoke. Um, Although at that, once punk happened, I really wasn't smoking pot too much because it was like, I sort of felt like you really had to be with it because you don't want to miss a thing. Um, but there were certainly people who were on heavier drugs, and, you know, and I know that was happening in England too. Like everybody was on speed, right? But yeah, it didn't appeal to me. But it was there, and there was that bit of a dark um, side to that. When I think about England, um, well, Sid obviously, got on the wrong side of all of that, and people do say it was that original tour with, when the Heartbreakers came over to London, that they brought of, this kind of drug mentality with them, and that could be, but obviously in England, stuff like that was happening as well. And uh, but later, I kind of remember seeing like the skinhead scene,
Yeah,
and I remember that also kind of a lot of drugs, or pills like Tuinals, like getting really out of it, or speed, that kind of. So it was more of an aggressive energy associated with drugs, and I sort of see that um, in sort of England. And that was, there was so much great music at that time too, 78, 79, when Madness started. I loved Madness, and the specials. And I went to a lot of early two-tone shows, Selector. Um, I love those bands. And but the audience was heavy. And you never knew how it was going to go.
yeah, that is a great music genre. But like you say, yeah, it was that could have violent bouts as well, couldn't it?
Yeah, it was unfortunate. But still the music was great. So,
Yeah,
um, back then it was like people would flit from skinhead to mod to soul boy, in the
you
matter
don't
of a
get
week.
you don't get that anymore, do you? Like, there's no cultural movements anymore.
I think that there are, and I feel like I'd like to know more about them, but I can't tell you like, oh, there's a certain scene. Certainly there are things. I don't really go out to shows that much, but a lot of the stuff I see is a little more like independent, sort of, indie rock slash maybe some jazz influence. But I'm pretty open. I like a lot of kinds of music. Um, but yeah, it's really changed. And I think obviously the having social media, everything changed with the phone.
Yeah,
And it really is incredible to think how we did all of this stuff without phones, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Back then, I would use a phone box.
yeah.
And yeah. And but you never knew if they would work, and I'd have to call like a collect call to speak to my mom, and it was a very different environment. Um, and you really had to find out. So I think for me, the punk thing was like I got to look out my window, which was one um, introduction because I lived on Second Avenue and 11th Street, and so you would see characters, and you could kind of be a voyeur a little bit, but you were taking note, and people were because it wasn't such a huge scene. So when you'd go to a club in those earlier days in New York, it seemed like you could kind of count the really punky looking people, on two hands. There wasn't a lot there were a lot of kids in the audience kind of, with long hair, and they definitely were not punky, which you see in photographs too.
Well, speaking of the live,
I think I just digressed from your question.
oh no, I was going to say that. Speaking of the live shows, what was some of your favourite gigs back then?
Oh boy. Well, X-Ray Specs coming to New York, CBGB's was really a fascinating and memorable show. Seeing the Clash, I couldn't really pick one out, but seeing those audiences in England and the Slits were really eye-opening. Kind of, because it was girls, and it was also the music was just so odd. It was really odd, it was disjointed, and but it was really interesting, and that appealed to me a lot. Uh, early shows. I mean, seeing Iggy Pop play on the Lust for Life tour in Boston in 1977. Wow, that was incredible to see him. Like, he was such a fantastic performer. And today, now he's still doing these great things. And somebody asked me, I was in Los Angeles, and they said, so, is punk started in New York or London or England? And I was like, I know it's really hard to say. And then people still aren't, the big debate. But somebody in the audience said, I think it was really Iggy and the Stooges who really started punk. And I think that might be true. Um, but who's to say? It doesn't matter. There was so much great music from both scenes. Just, but I loved early shows. I loved early Talking Heads, Blondie, they were fantastic. And yeah, I'm sure there's some other specific show, but it was so much. It was really, we were kind of spoiled.
Where do you think had the best music? Then do you think it was London and England or America?
Well, I think, oh, do you think, say the best music or
Yeah, yeah, the best bands.
oh, tough question. Okay, I think that it really is a hard question, but I know I was drawn to, I always had a desire to get to England. And I think that you comes across in the diaries. It was from day one, I was like, I got to go over there. And because I was drawn to all, the bands and the style and the look. And at that point, I had never been to England. And so it was kind of a real, I was on a mission. But in a lot of ways, I became a super big Anglophile. I loved so many bands. And there are a million I haven't even mentioned, Gang of Four. I remember seeing them early on. What a show. I mean, that was unbelievable. But there was, I really liked the sensibility in England, and I just was, the way of life. I was fascinated as a child, with my Beatrix Potter books, and so I was already like, oh, I want to live in a little cottage with a cup of tea, or maybe I want to go on the King's Road and be, a kind of a wild punk girl. So, but I did both things in the end.
Well, let's talk about that first trip to England to see the Clash. Was England how you expected it to be in London?
I think it was, but I think it was even better to be there and really see that in front of your eyes was just absolutely stunning. It was incredible. Um, I was just, I kind of flabbergasted and very excited. So I remember it as being really colorful. Even though, England was pretty depressed around the time. And remember back then you would take like a train, you try to bunk the fare in London or, pass for 15 years old. Um, I wouldn't try that today. But you'd always have somebody who'd be like some old guy, I fought the war for kids like you. There was always somebody still wagging their finger. I'm an American kid. I grew up in New York City, this, sort of um obviously a famous metropolis like London, but um, the Americans, and it's certainly true to this day, is that our sense of history is it's vast within American history, but it's sort of limited. I mean, we're not talking about like London, Europe, where you're seeing things around you that are 12th, 13th century. I mean, we're still a relatively young country. So I think going to England, um, that there was always a sense of like finding out about the culture. But it's interesting to think that in 1978, World War II was not that far behind. That's kind of an interesting thought when you think about it now.
Yeah,
Uh, so, the punk thing was all the more reason that it was really strange and probably necessary because at that point, and also with the kind of crisis and in the minor crisis over there and the everybody on the dole financial crisis, things needed to shake up. And sometimes that's what happens, right? With culture, things have to get kind of bad before they did some beautiful creative scene emerges.
yeah, definitely. Hopefully, we get a good creative scene now because it's a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I know. I hope so too.
with that Clash tour, you went up and down the country to see them. You saw them at different shows on that tour. What was the tour like?
Well, so I went with a bunch of punks, and these were virtually kids that I met at like in a pub or at a show. And I got to kind of know a little crowd of them. And they were like, oh, we're going down to Victoria Station the next day. And one of the kids that I got to know, actually, one of the kids I first got to know in England was Toby Mott. And so Toby was later part of the Grey organization. He's a big punk collector now. He came to my reading in London recently with Gina Birch, which was really fun. And anyway, he was a kid living on Warwick Way with his sister and brother. And we saw him. I first went there with my sister Hillary. We stayed in a bed and breakfast in Victoria. And then Hillary left after about 3 weeks and went back. And I stayed for another month or so. And I really just started, I was alone, it was kind of intimidating. But I, just got to know these kids like, oh, we're going to Victoria Station and hop on a, bus and, they're playing in Leeds. And I went and I just showed up there, and I was trying to kind of like suss it out. Like, what do these kids think of me? Because some of them were younger. They were overall much more like, had like a lot of pink and green hair and leather jackets and studs. Um, and they were, they were sleeping rough. And they were like, give me 10p, mate. They were asking for money to buy a ticket to get on the coach. And, I sort of had some money and I'd buy my own ticket, but I was in a different position than them. And I'd, get on the coach, but everybody had a good time. And then we'd go to the show. I think like Coventry and Leeds, we might have spent like there was a show and then we went the next night to the other show. I think once or twice we went back to London. But the punks were funny because they were so proud. And they would go, like the London punks, they'd come up to Leeds or Coventry and they'd act all the more like be real tough. Like we'll show them we're from London. And you could see that, kind of competition between different areas. But I think they soon realized, yeah, well, these kids in Leeds, they're pretty, they mean business too.
Well, I'm a massive fan of the Clash, like yourself. Obviously, you got to meet them a lot, and you saw Joe Strummer a lot. You even threw a party for him back in New York, didn't you?
Well, the Clash played at the Palladium, and it was their first U.S. show in February '79. So, yeah, I had already met them, and I'd already seen them on the tour in England. So that all happened in like fall of '78. But in February '79, they were going to play, and I decided with some friends of mine to do a party, not at my house, and it was above a funeral home. It was kind of this crazy setup, and word got out, and I was really, really hoping all the Clash would show up, but I think Topper came in, and I think Joe Strummer and Mick Jones, they went to probably went to Studio 54, they but Topper showed up and I was like, yay, but that was the plan. And that was the show that night where I jumped on the stage.
What was that like?
I have to tell you, I had sort of planned it out, and my sister were like, okay, we're going to do it. And I had just come from England and I had seen people doing this on a regular basis. And so I thought, well, maybe I can do it. But people in New York didn't do that. They were, it was a lot of seated venues. I mean, CBGB's wasn't, but it was much more subdued in a certain way. And I jumped on the stage. My sister pushed me up and I ran across the stage, and then like almost instantly a bouncer just grabbed me and he threw me in a cold alleyway, and I heard the band. I was just like, oh my God, I'm missing the Clash. I was like, oh. But it was so exciting the party was great and all these musicians showed up. So it's kind of memorable. And I saved a bunch of photos from then too. So that was like, it's cool. I have the document of that night.
Yeah, it's in the book, some of the photos.
Yeah, yeah. And I made a bunch of really good mixed tapes for that party. And that's one thing that they just went missing. And
Really?
yeah, they were really good because it was, I collected a lot of imports, and I have my singles today, and it's a bigger pile. We're in the middle of moving house soon, so we're having to go through our stuff, and it's really, you could see we have a lot of records and books, and it's a bit of a challenge.
Are they records behind you there? Are they books at the back?
Those are all just my boyfriend Alan's records,
Ah,
and
right.
a lot of mine are in storage, but yeah, we've got got a lot of stuff.
Have you got to get rid of some stuff to move, or you take it all with you?
Trying to get a little bit rid of things. It's hard, but
Yeah.
I looked at all my punk singles. I'd buy these imports that came from England, go to record stores in New York, and they were just treasures, like even for instance, those Clash singles, the artwork was so beautiful. Clash City Rockers or, Day the World Turned Day Glow. And I actually, when you talk about English or American or New York punk, it's really true that the English aesthetic was really fabulous. Terms of just the designers like Jamie Reed, with the Sex Pistols. And yeah, I think the artwork was, people were really, just really put a lot of energy into that. And so I love those singles. They're, but I'm not gonna, I'm gonna hold on to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're nice as a little collection, but I have more than I thought. And yeah, just I'm looking over there.
You mentioned you lost the mixtapes and stuff, but have you still got the tapes of the interviews you'd go doing, the venues?
I do have all the cassettes of those, sure. Yeah. And I've got them digitized, which is really good.
You,
So, yeah, I recently did a reading and it was with the interview I did with Lux Interior. And it was really, people love to hear it. It's actually a pretty good recording, and his voice is just it's kind of deep, and he's like, yeah, I always listen to a lot of rock and roll, he's like got this whole kind of Midwestern sort of twang to him. And I remember the night really well. And this was me just capturing an interview as a fan. I had no intention to do anything with it. And I still do have those things. A friend of mine was like, I don't have tons of them, but I interviewed well, live bands. So I have all the Clash on tour, Slits, all that stuff. And I've got Susie and the Banshees. I've got quite a lot of, I brought my tape recorder to England that in 78. So maybe it's time to share it on a YouTube or something like that. Because, I'd like people to hear it. So
yeah, you think of doing that then, putting it on YouTube or doing something with it, yeah.
not sure if YouTube would be the right, um, I don't know if that's really the right way to go, but I'm open to suggestions if you think of anything, like something, where it's not like a big, it's just something that you're sharing. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know what the best platform would be, but I'd like to, because, it's people are curious and I'd love to share it.
It would be great to hear. I imagine, like, with the punk scene now, there's not a lot of people have passed on from that scene, haven't there? So I imagine there's a few there that you've got that are not here anymore.
Yeah, well, live tape of the Ramones or um, Clash, and interviews, yeah, interviews with James Chance with the Contortions, and Lux Interior. Yeah, they're people that are not around. So
It would be great to, like, even say, even the live shows would be great to hear.
yeah, they're wild because the audience, particularly with the Clash, it's just like wow, they were so mad, just the energy. So it is, you can really hear it. Of course, some of the recordings are not so great, and it's kind of like a swimmy sound. It's like
Is there nothing you could do as sort of I don't know, is there anybody you know that could fix that? That's good with audio.
yeah, I think so. I mean, I've kind of looked at it. Um, I don't know if there's really a way. There's also like things where suddenly I started to record over something. You know how you do.
Yeah.
Um, but it was Thurston Moore who digitized them for me, and he came over to my house many, many years ago, and he was super encouraging about the diaries. And this was like in 2007 or 2008 or something. And he was like, wow, this is great. And just the flyers, a lot of things that he probably also had, but other obscure, uh, lesser known bands, kind of just quirky pieces of ephemera and stuff. And yeah, he took. I had the cassettes, and I said, I gotta get these digitized. Otherwise, I'll play them one day, and the spool will, they're old. And he took them off my hands for about a week or two, and I was a little nervous about it. I was like, but he of course understood that, and he kind of guarded them, I think, with his life, and he helped me. He digitized them. So I don't know. I don't think I think he just did them as is, which is, that's kind of their beauty, because you
Yeah.
get that sense of they're not just clean recordings.
Yeah, it's real and it's like authentic.
Yeah. So
Back then in the punk days, when you were buying records, going to all these gigs and stuff, did you ever think of starting a fanzine or anything like that?
um I didn't, but my friend Julia Gordon, who I'm actually doing a conversation with this week in New York, she had her fanzine Beat It, which was very influenced by Sniffing Glue. I have a lot of early fanzines like Ripped and Torn, Sniffing Glues, and I've got other sort of odd ones and some that are very rare. But no, I kind of left that up to other people. But curiously enough, I think one project I want to do now is to do a kind of a more of a facsimile of the book, where it's like a full page of something, not so much diary entries, but like visuals, and maybe more ephemera. And I'd love to do a fanzine type of thing, like a little bit of a book, but not like a full-on book. And then also do sort of put that out and create a little exhibit of the actual, stuff. Because I've got a lot of things, a lot of, interesting, ticket stubs and flyers and drawings, things that aren't in the book that would be fun to share.
What was it like? Was it hard to keep all these things? Where did you keep more like when you were growing up, when you were in the scene?
It's kind of a mystery to me. I would take things, I probably rolled them up, but it's really hard for me, like in England, to think, how did I get that flyer? And doesn't have a lot of folds in it. Like, how did I get it back to, I would roll things up and maybe, somehow put it in a pocket, maybe an inner pocket, inside a coat, because I wasn't somebody who like carried a handbag or or a backpack. I just showed up with my coat on. So I must have like stuffed it in, some little jacket I was wearing. Back then we were all underdressed, it would be freezing cold and nobody was wearing big jackets. You'd show up to these shows. It often makes me like, God, it's a good thing, we didn't all just die of pneumonia, because we were running around, like, this was the down jacket was already a big thing in my high school years, but that was the first thing you ditched, back in the punk days. You didn't want a big puffer jacket. So you'd be, all about style. You'd just be running around with a little blazer and, teeny little scarf, no hat, no gloves. It'd be snowing. And yeah, you'd stuff a flyer probably right in the jacket. That's true. I think that's what I must have done.
You've mentioned it a few times in this episode. CBGB was obviously had a big part in your life and in the punk scene. What was that venue like?
It was dark and clanky. Like, I hear just a lot of glasses and the bar action. The bar was very long, a lot of people. You had to walk in a long, long alleyway. well, not an alleyway, entranceway, but it felt like an alleyway. It was sort of like a bowling alley almost. It was long, but the bar covered the whole side, right side as you walked in, and that was just filled with noise. The band was in the back. They had the great posters of these dancers from the 1890s, which were just beautiful. You see them in a lot of early photos of CBGBs, or late, actually. I think they held on to them for years. The bathrooms were just layered in graffiti. The smell was kind of bad. It was like there was a bit of a kind of a shabby place. And Max's Kansas City couldn't have been more different. I think of Max's Kansas City, you had a restaurant downstairs, you go upstairs, and this place has been going since the early 70s, so it's already had the Warhol crowd and all of that. But it was again dark, but it was like black, shiny black and chrome, black and silver. That's the way I see that. So it was a glossy.
So, what about the Tier 3 venue? Because that's where the Stair Kids, your band in '79, played.
Oh, well, it's hard for me to do these interviews without talking about Tier 3, which was the club that my sister booked in Tribeca. And my friends, Amy Rigby and Michael McMahon and Bob Gervix were all in the band, the Stair Kids. And it's, actually they're making a live record of that coming out on Feeding Tube Records. And that should be out in October.
So yeah.
Soon. Yeah.
Yeah, very soon.
Yeah. And the songs exist on Bandcamp right now, but Tier 3 was also fantastic. It's so much fun when you think about these clubs and you can just picture what was it like, walking in. Tier 3 had different levels. The stage was right there, lined up with the audience. So it was kind of this, again, feeling of overflow between the bands and the people in the audience. And it was, there were a lot of artists that were there, visual artists and filmmakers, really interesting crowd, but it was a fun crowd. And then there'd be just like me and my friends and, DJs who didn't always play what the manager wanted, which would have been like, the Rolling Stones Shattered or something. And, we would play sometimes some downright weird stuff, almost as if we were trying to repel people from dancing. And, just being upstarts, we would do crazy things. We used to do dance lines. But Tier 3 is the place where, like, the Raincoats played when they came to New York, and the Slits, and so many bands. Madness even played there from England, and all these great local bands like the Bush Tetras, Lydia Lunch, Eight-Eyed Spy. It was, my sister really had great taste and just brought in people. And it was a very different place. It's funny, you talk about CBGBs and Max's kind of low, high culture, or sort of one's more glossy than the other. In the case of Tier 3, it was the Mud Club down the street. Also in Tribeca, which was an unknown kind of territory back then. But that was much, much more, like had a red rope. It was a little more classy. But, finally, all these places ended up being a bit debauched. Even the classy places, you don't know what's going on in those bathrooms.
Really, yeah.
Yeah.
With the Stair Kids, though, you mentioned like the bands and the audiences were all as one kind of thing, but what was it like for you being on stage? Did you enjoy it?
I did. I was, at that point, I'd been seeing so many bands as a fan. the last time I had been singing in a band was back in high school, this cover band, and that lasted for a long time. I took my voice lessons, but suddenly I'm thinking now, yeah, it's about time. And I was beginning to feel a little bit uneasy because I thought, well, it's time for me to get up there and do something. And I just was lucky because I met these friends and we all had kind of similar influences and started to practice and did a few shows, very short lived. But that kind of paved the way for later things I was involved in, like when I moved to England and started studying. And uh, that's where I played with, I also different bands, but I did the Drowning Craze, and that was the in 1981.
What was that like? You did the debut single, didn't you? Then did you leave straight after that? What happened there?
Yeah, that was me. I went off to school afterwards. And I think I mentioned in my book too that kind of this was like, would education win out or would, music? And it was kind of, I tried to, have my cake and eat it too, but it was quite tricky, really. So the Drowning Craze was my friend Peter Kent from Beggar's Banquet. And I was just listening to a great podcast with Simon from Bella Union, his label, and Simon Raymond, who was in the band with me, and he had a really good description of hanging out in Earl's Court at Beggar's Banquet Records because they had Situation 2, the label was upstairs, and I also hung out there, but we didn't know each other at the time, and he has a great description of Billy McKenzie from the Associates coming in and for a meeting upstairs with Ivo and Peter Kent, who was really pivotal in getting Drowning Craze going. That all just happened so fast, and I'm really proud of that record. It's we did it in a day. I mean, that's the way things were back then, really. People, it depends. Some records seem to take a while, but people just would just go and do it. And
What was it like recording the single? Did you enjoy being in the studio?
oh, loved being in the studio. In fact, I really do miss that. And just now I've been like pulling out some little, recording equipment, and I'm thinking I want to get something set up in the new flat because just to try singing, working again, because I've done some sporadic things, but I just met somebody the other day who has also invited me to do some singing. So we'll see what comes out of that. But yeah, I'm excited. I loved being in the studio. However, when we recorded with Trevor Horn, um, with ZTT in a later band after Pigbag with Instinct, it was fabulous to record in SARM West in these amazing cutting edge studios. But it went on and on and on. And, the initial single didn't come out and the B-side did on a 12-inch. But this level of perfection that became kind of like, I love being in the studio, but this is like, just get that sound right. It was at a certain point, you have to kind of let it go, I suppose. But I'm not a pop producer.
Well, with Pigbag though, like you said before, Instinct. How do you look back at that band?
Well, recently when I went to London and did the this event with Gina Birch, and also at Rough Trade, I did something with Thurston Moore, and the whole batch of my Pigbag mates showed up. And
Really?
Ollie drove down from Bristol. I was like, I was just so touched, It was great to see them. And I've been in touch with James from, we've we keep in touch pretty, we've been on holiday together in the last years and stuff, but I hadn't seen a lot of the other guys. It was great. Um, and the pig bag experience was also fantastic. That was we did a lot of things in about a year and a half, like two singles, one studio album, one live album, tour of England, tour of Europe, Japan. It was really like condensed. But yeah, I love that. That was a whole nother type of dance kind of groove, really.
And then Instinct, what about that band that came after Pigbag? How do you look back at that band?
Yeah, so Instinct was born from kind of the end of Pigbag. Simon Underwood, who was my partner back then, and he'd been in the pop group before Pigbag, great musician, and James, we decided to do Instinct. And it was an interesting involvement because those guys had already toured a lot with Pigbag, and James had a band, Hardware, I think, and Simon obviously with the pop group, but I'd really only toured. Well, I actually hadn't toured. I'd been, with Stair Kits, and so I kind of wanted to do that a little bit, but it was the early 80s and everybody was thinking about, the studio and doing this studio product. And so, we went into that and we ended up doing the Ambassadors Theater, the 7-night run that Paul Morley put on with Trevor. And actually, I just came across some really great photos that I'm going to post soon of that. So that was great. And then we got in session people. And, there was a lot of money at our disposal to do these sort of wild things, but it wasn't necessarily something, I wasn't never have been super tech driven in terms of recording. I was like, oh, that's great. Wow, Fairlight, cool. I appreciated how intense that was. And synclaviers, renting these things in 1983 for, 800 pounds a day. But this was the world of ZTT, and so it was pretty glamorous in its own way. But yeah, I kind of missed the touring part a little bit.
After these bands, did you start teaching music to children?
I did. It took a while, but back in 2000, about like 2005, a friend of mine, I'd been singing in different things and doing stuff, but I was at the moment I was back in New York. I'd lived in Barcelona, and I was kind of, trying to figure out. I was working in as designing windows in a shop, which I actually really enjoyed. But I was trying to, figure like, well, what's the next move? And she said, oh, they're looking for a music teacher. And then it was kind of no looking back. And I accepted this job at a really good school. And, I was the choral director. And I did that I did that for like 17, 18 years. And I've been teaching for 20 odd years, and little kids, right now I'm sort of taking a little break from the teaching, but I'm looking to get back involved in some work with children. Yeah. The writing the book has kept me quite busy, I will say.
I'm always going to ask, what is life like for you these days? I imagine it is busy.
It's been fantastic. The book actually, just about a year ago, we sort of finished some of the final touches, working with a designer. I really loved that process, kind of more than anything, was because we worked by Zoom. She was in LA, I was in New York, and she was just very good at interpreting my ideas. And I was pretty clear kind of about how I saw it. And so that was really fun. And, making decisions. But that was where I was at like about a year ago. And then we did a soft launch in December. And then the book came out in March in the States. And I went to England and just been like, it's been so great, just talking to people like you and doing the podcasts and and doing conversations live with people. I just was up in the Catskill Mountains last week at a kind of a smaller event, but it was the warmest crowd. It was so great. And I really enjoyed it. And, I've been doing these PowerPoints where I kind of create these images from the book, and people really love that. So it's been, I've learned a lot doing all of this. Been incredible.
Well, the thing is, that time of your life, it's a big time in anybody's life. Like, you were 17, 16, 17, 18. Like, you're still finding yourself. It's not just about, as much it is about the punk scene culturally and musically. Like, it's your life and, like, what
Yeah.
you're up to, coming over to England, boyfriends, music. It's like anybody's teenage life, really.
Yeah. It sort of is. It's true. I mean, I was traveling, so that made it kind of, a little bit, and eventually living in England. And that was a whole nother thing to be like an expatriate, and getting used to customs and but yeah, it was just a different way to kind of live your life. There's a lot of bouncing back and forth, in the book. I'm in England and New York. I'm always moving from one place to another. Um, but yeah, I was just still like figuring out who I was and there were crushes and there were boyfriends. In the early days, not so much. I think I was just wanted to go there and see the music. I mean, you always had a crush on somebody. We're kind of like, oh, but it was really no time for any kind of relationship.
I'm not surprised with the amount of gigs and, like you say, every day was an adventure, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. It really was. And I feel like I'm just super happy I can like share that. And also the diary part is I think it's important it becomes something that, a lot of people, girls would keep diaries um but as it turns out, this is really kind of unique because it's not so much a memoir, even though it is looking back at what happened then, but it's really, writing it like that adventurous thing happening every day.
Yeah,
It's
it is a brilliant book. I've got it here, like I said, I Feel Famous, Punk Diary,
you
77 to 81. It is a great read. So, what have you got planned for the future? Have you got more talks and things like that?
Well, I have a talk this week, and then I'd be busy moving house, so that's going to take a little time. But I want to work on this fanzine idea, and then I have in March something at a arts club. It's going to be more fashion based, so I have to think about that in the spring. I really want to go to Chicago. I want to go. I want to bring this to Barcelona because I live there, and I think I could get some good friends who would be into punk. And I speak a little Spanish, so wish me luck.
uh,
I'd love to come back to England, and I'd love to come to Leeds.
yeah, yeah, you'll have to come over and do a talk like, yeah, in the north of England. What are your memories of the north of England then when you were over here back then?
I had a good time, as I recall. I was there twice during the punk days and then Pigbag. Um, and I went up to Scotland. But I would like to go back. I have a very good friend who lives near Leeds, and my another friend who just wrote a book about, you might have seen Audrey Golden's book about the Manchester scene. So I'd love to go back. I was hoping to be part of the Louder Than Words festival this year. They asked me to do it, but I just couldn't can go. So hopefully there'll be more opportunities.
Like, how can people keep up to date with everything you're doing, like social media and your book and everything?
Good question. So I'm honestly, with social media, I could be a little bit better. I've got two Instagram accounts. One is I Feel Famous Book, and then I've got Zang32, which was really my personal account, and that's even private. But it's now become a lot of punk stuff. I'm not on Facebook.
No, I'm
And
not.
yeah, pretty much that. So it's pretty much Instagram, but I'd also like to get a proper website together because, even just to put like demos and because I've done so many different things with different people, it would be really fun to kind of collect it all there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you should look into that. See, I don't know.
Yeah.
You start a website. I'm not sure about anything like that, but it,
Well, this is wonderful what you've done behind the curtain. It's fantastic.
thank you. Yeah, it's been like to hear stories like with guests like yourself. It's brilliant to do it.
I think I just saw Ja Wobble was on one.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I love Ja Wobble's work. I saw him play in New York probably about 7, 8 years ago. It was fantastic
yeah.
in
He's a
Brooklyn.
brilliant bass player, isn't he?
But I really like I like what you're doing, and I'll keep up with it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Probably getting late your time. Yeah,
8:30 over here. What time is it over there? How many hours behind are you?
5. It's 3:30.
All right.
So
Yeah, yeah. Have you got much planned for today then?
I think I had a busy morning, but I think yeah, probably, not tons. Easy afternoon.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, you've got all the moving to get started as well, haven't you? So.
Oh gosh, I know. I'm almost like, oh, I need any kind of, I was so happy that we were doing this today because I'm like, I don't have to think about boxes. I already spent like 2 hours this morning talking, trying to figure out the movers and all of that. So all
Yeah.
those logistics, but it'll be good.
Yeah, yeah. Good luck with everything, with the move and with the book and anything other projects you do in the future.
Pretty much working on that and yeah, that's a few things kind of going. Just trying to get like organized, yeah, for yeah, moving house really right now.
Yeah, it must be pretty hectic. Where can people get the book? Where's the best place for you for people to get the book?
Oh, so one way to get the book is on the Hat and Beard website direct, and that's you can find by just looking up Hat and Beard, it gives the opportunity to do that. But in England, I think the book has been available, but now I think we're reducing the price. So I think you can get it right direct through. You can order it through Foils or through WH Smith, a rough trade. And I think now, because the price was it was a little bit pricey over there. So I want it to become more available. So actually, I heard this week also that Idler magazine, there's a review of the book along with Dorothy Max. So that's interesting. That's out. But yeah, the book should be available in England, but you may have to, order it. Might be Turnaround is the publisher there or the distributor. And I think it's available on Amazon, but people try to avoid that if they can. Where did you get your copy?
I actually got mine on Amazon actually.
You did? Yeah.
Yeah. I get
Yeah,
most
well,
books. It's just easy. Like every book's on there really, and it's just like
yeah, it is easier. And that's why, I really think with the selling of the books, it's like you kind of want to avoid that route, but ultimately it's the easy way to get it. And I think, you also want it to be available. So
I think as well it came like pretty quickly. Do you know what I mean? Like Amazon have that quick delivery as well, so I think that was one of the reasons as well I got it off of there. But I'm sure like local bookshops and things, like you said, WH Smith and things like that, they'll have it,
Yeah.
won't
Yeah, you might have to like special order it. I would love to think that it's on bookshelves. It might be, bookstores, but I think right now I'm going to double check on that. But I think you have to maybe double order. But even if you like Google it, it's available through a lot of sources, I think, over there. So I
they? Yeah,
hope so.
no, I do as well because it is a brilliant book. Like you say, it's not a memoir as such as it's a diary, so it's like an easier read as well, and it takes you on a journey. Yeah, I think it's brilliant.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, and I enjoyed the chat as well. It was great to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm so glad we did it.
I know we've had it planned a while, haven't we? But yeah, it's great to
You know,
get it done.
you guys work hard too. I know. It's like, how many do you do a week? Or
Um, I usually put 2 out a week. I started it in October 2023. I've done about 130 episodes, so I do quite a few.
got a lot of catching up to do.
Uh,
You do a great job.
yeah, thank you for that. If there's any episodes you'd like to see, I can just send you a link for them, like the punk ones. I had Dennis Brown on. He lived with Sid and Nancy.
Wow.
He
Wow.
had a book, Padlocks. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have heard of that. When did that come out?
I think it's pretty recent, last couple of years.
Yeah. I'm going to make a note of that. There's so many sort of, and I love that title, Padlock. That's great. Um, but I'm in touch with Dorothy Max, and I want to get her second book, which I love. Viv Albertine, friend of mine, she's got another book coming out. Um, yeah, the books are coming. So, and my friend Amy Rigby's about to put another book out. So, it's you got to keep up with everybody.
That's the thing, it's finding like you want to read loads, but fitting it in, isn't it? Like, especially for you with being busy with the move and
Yeah,
everything.
it's really interesting for me too, also to read the book and or to read other people's books. And yeah, I love like, Darcy Max. We know similar people. Like her husband, I used to I played in Monochrome set with him, and I had another band with him, um, Foz. So it's kind of just this small world. So it's really fun to hear about what other people are doing, or what's your version of the story in
Yeah.
England or in other parts of the world. I think that's a kind of a nice way to look at the research, and also as talk about New York or London, talk about bigger picture up north, or there's always a lot of stories to tell. So we just got to keep up with them.
Yeah, definitely. Do you still keep in touch with people then from that back in the day, like Viv and other people like that? Yeah.
Yeah, Viv and I are in touch for sure. Viv Albertine, um, and Nana Cherry. Another great book that came out, this year. And I missed her when she was in New York, but we're in touch, and she's lovely. And I know her family, from uh, just from hanging out the old days, Pig Bag and Rip Rig and Panic and all that. So it feels kind of like a family connection too.
Yeah, it's great that you've kept them friendships from them all them years ago and you're still in touch with them.
Yeah, and what's really fun with the book is that it's people have come out of the woodwork who, might have been mentioned in the book, or like in England, and it's like, wow, how are you doing? Or kind of reconnecting,
Yeah.
with so it's I've met a lot of new people, which has been wonderful, and also, reconnected. So
Well, that's the good thing about social media as well, isn't it? Like you can connect, like doing this with you now on Zoom over in
yeah,
America, like can connect with anybody these days, can't you?
yeah, it is. It's great. It's a whole new world.
Do you wish you had the internet back then? Oh, are you glad you didn't? back in the punk days?
Had a
Like the internet and everything, and mobile phones and things.
yeah, well, I don't want to sound like too um kind of like, oh, the good old days, but I do think that um yeah, it's hard for me even to imagine a punk happening with a cell phone.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I just really can't imagine it. So I think it's good in a way that that didn't exist. However, um, it's been so great to see footage of bands emerge or recordings that you never knew existed. And so that's what I'm hoping with the book is also like, oh, here's more stories that are like, wow, look at this. Here's, this whatever it could be, this ticket stub you've never seen, or oh, somebody was doing drawings, or or here's a like this photograph. There are a couple of photos. I never saw this picture until about 3 years ago.
Really?
And I was like, wow, what's this? There I am in the audience, CBGBs, watching X-Ray Specs. There's Cheetah Chrome from the Dead Boys and a whole bunch of, wacky looking people here. That was so exciting to discover that photo.
Have you
So
done that as well with a lot of photos and videos where you've gone through and you're in them? Or is it just that one?
uh, there's about there's about well, I don't know. I think more exists than I know, but I've definitely come across about four or five. And there's a really good one that I want to get of me in the audience watching Nico at
Really?
CBG. And all I've seen is a little kind of screenshot of it. But it would be fun to see that. Yeah. People were taking pictures, and I kind of remember that. Um, but yeah, and like my friend Julia Gordon, who I'm talking with this week, she was there doing an amazing picked photograph. So it was, yeah, it was. People were documenting it, but it's always entertaining. Yeah,
We didn't even touch on people like you mentioned Nico there. Like you even came across people like Andy Warhol and John Belushi that weren't in the punk scene but were around it, didn't you?
they were around. Yeah, they were kind of people who would show up at a certain time. Like I think John Belushi was friends with the Dead Boys, and
Right, yeah.
so he was suddenly around a lot. And it was Saturday Night Live just started, and that was, but Warhol would show up. Like he'd show up with like Debbie Harry, or when the Clash played the Palladium that time when I jumped on the stage and had that party. Well, I poked my head in the dressing room, and they were really like bouncers, and of course Warhol was in there.
Really?
Um, and I was kind of like, oh, I'd like to get in, but I don't think I really, I managed to really get in the room because that was it. It's a lot of these bands were already kind of little, kind of celebrities in their own way.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I'm a massive fan of the Clash, and even seen like you interactions with Joe Strummer, Mick Jones, Paul Antopper. It's great to see that.
Yeah. I'd like to think, I think they were really receptive to fans too. And, it was a lot of energy, a lot of people coming at them in a lot of different directions, which I think is part of like that being in a band.
Does it feel like a long time ago now? That then does it feel a different life, like the Pugs days?
Yeah, yes and no. But, of course, like writing the book kind of really brought it back. So it feels a little bit closer. And I still have good friends from that time. But we kind of joke with each other like, oh, good old punk days. And but I think we value that period for sure. And sometimes it seems like yesterday in a funny way, but other times it doesn't. Uh, clearly, like talking about going out to see bands, like, if this was then, it would have just reeled off a million shows. But I think we're doing pretty good, uh, having sort of come through all of that, and yeah, it's amazing. But I think the main thing is, right now there's a lot of things happening in the world that are, kind of pretty scary, to put it mildly. Living in the USA right now is really, kind of a challenging time, let's just say, put it mildly. So I think sometimes about like all this punk uh, kind of focus for me with the book, feels in a way like, well, maybe there's some sort of energy to tap into there.
Yeah,
Um, which is like part of it is just, looking for identity and kind of smashing up the system, however you want to say it, or being creative. Like, what can you do to, um, what can you do to kind of flourish and get through these times?
it's a crazy world nowadays these days, isn't it?
It is. But it's been really great to, yeah, to do the talks and speak to other people, and yeah.
It's brilliant to get to speak to you and hear about these times and how life's treating you now and everything.
Yeah, things are good. Things are good. I think you know, there's a changing times, but I do feel like it's been a really exciting thing, this doing the book, and I'm excited for what's coming next.
Yeah, me too. Like I say, I'll have to. Well, I follow you on Instagram and everything anyway, but I'll have to keep up to date with everything that you're doing and any new projects and things.
Sounds great.
Well, thank you so much, Angela. I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening.
Yeah,
Um,
you.
and yeah, let's keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I've follow you on Instagram and things, so I'll let you know when the episode's out and everything. But yeah, we'll have to keep in touch.
Sounds good. And be well. Best to you.
You too. Thank you, Angela.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.